A few weeks ago, I posted about the importance of spec work for getting new filmmaking clients, especially when you're trying to break into a part of the industry that you might not have that much experience in. I was in exactly this position a couple of years ago when I was trying to get a little bit more branded content work to supplement my documentary income, and one of the people I met with looked through my portfolio and came back with, "This is all really cool, but can you show us something that's a little more moody, with a commercial look and a bit of camera movement?" Since most of my doc work is handheld, I didn't really have much to show, and I thought about just letting the gig go, but then I thought, I know I can do this, I just need to prove it. So I went out and shot the thing in less than 5 hours and on a total budget of just $150. And since some of you asked to see what I'd made after the last video, I thought I'd show it to you here, but go one step further and break down how I pulled this off on an ultra low budget in a couple hours to show you why there really are no excuses to just get out there and make stuff so you can get the work you want. Hey guys, welcome back, and if you're new here, my name is Luke Forsyth, and on this channel, I teach the skills I've learned over 10 years working as a documentary filmmaker and photographer. Oh, and before I forget, welcome to the first official video from my new studio. I just moved from Vancouver to Toronto, and I'm still only about half done with the setup, so it's not totally dialed in, but it's getting there. This is a tiny room. It's just 8 feet by 8 feet, and I'm gonna do a full video breakdown of how I built it soon, but I wanted to get this video out first, even if it's not perfect yet. Let me know what you think in the comments. Alright, so right off the bat, I'm obviously not a commercial cinematographer. I've specialized in documentaries for most of my career, but I do like to do commercial stuff on the side because it's usually well paid, local, and it's nice to flex a few different creative muscles from time to time. But since people only want to hire you for what you've already proven you can do, even though I have a ton of TV experience, when I want to lock down new clients, I still have to convince them that I'm capable of shooting in the style they want. Like I said, the job I wanted was calling for a moody look with lots of camera movement, which I was pretty sure I could do even though I didn't have any samples in my reel. So I rented the cheapest dolly I could find, which is about $30 for the day, a haze machine for $20, and I paid a friend $75 and a case of beer to help me out and be my on-screen talent for an afternoon. The total budget, including the beer, was under $150, and I think it turned out pretty well, all things considered. It's less than a minute long, and before I get into the breakdown, I'll play it through in a second just so you can see what I came up with. And before I offend any real commercial DPs out there, I know this isn't the best piece of commercial work that's ever been made, because let's be honest, it's not even close. But the point wasn't to land Nike or Apple as my next client, it was to make a cheap and cheerful short that fit the brief and showed I was capable of more than just handheld verite shooting without spending a lot in the way of time or money. And speaking of high value on a budget, like that segue, the sponsor of today's video is Audio, but I'll talk more about them later. First, let's watch the thing. Okay, so that's that. I think it turned out pretty well considering what we were working with, and in the end, it did land me the gig I wanted. I still show this commercial sometimes when people are looking for certain types of work samples, and for $150, it's paid itself off a bunch of times over. So let's get into how I did this with a minimal budget, gear, and almost no time. First off, let's talk about the gear. Like I said, I rented the absolute cheapest dolly I could find, which was a total piece of junk. It was just a couple of plastic tubes and a set of wheels that I could fit a tripod onto and push the thing. It was so janky that in a bunch of shots, you can totally see the camera moving up and down, but honestly, who cares? I don't think it hurt the shots much, and it was better than spending $500 on a real dolly. We also used a small haze machine, a single 1x1 light panel with a China cube attachment, a couple of small pocket lights, some colored lighting gels, a camera, a tripod, and a 1992 Toyota Corolla we used for the tracking shots. that a tow truck driver gave me for free when I was working on a show, but that's a different story. The very first step was to light the space for that moody look I needed to hit, and so I started off by turning on and off all the lights in the place to see if I could get away with not using any of my own lights. The bike shop overheads were a little too bright, unfortunately, so I ended up shutting all of them off and instead hanging my 1x1 panel with the China Cube attachment from the ceiling just out of frame here. I set the color temperature to around 6,000 to give off a really cold sort of light, and you can almost see it here in the first push-in shot. Then we hazed the room to add a bit of texture, which is why you can sort of see this glowing effect around the light where it's shining down. If you've never used one of these haze machines, a quick tip is that you don't actually want to see the smoke. You just want the air full of particles so that it adds some depth to the lighting. So haze the hell out of it, and then you want to fan it around for a bit and let it settle. Otherwise it's going to be swirling around in the background and look like someone's chain smoking on set. The only light that I added was the 1x1 panel with the China Cube, and everything else was already on location when we got there. I really liked this warm work light in the background because it balanced out the coolness of the key light nicely. And if we look at another angle, there was also a work light right over the bench, and I just left that on, even though I taped a green gel and some tracing paper over it to soften it and give it a bit of a grimy industrial tint. I'm sorry, I don't have any real BTS footage of this, but we were in a crazy rush to get this done before the owner kicked us out, and I didn't have a second shooter to help. Once the space was lit, I basically just had my friend start working on his bike while I moved the dolly setup all over the place to get some different angles. The whole aim was to show camera movement, so really this whole project was designed around the dolly, not the bike shop. Dolly and slider movement only really works if there's something in the foreground to show movement, so I experimented with putting different layers in front of the camera until I found some that I liked. When we came in for the closer shots, I left most of the same lighting, though I think I pulled off the green gels and added a 1/8 CTO gel to the work light, or maybe even something a little more subtle to warm it up. I can't remember exactly. I was always trying to backlight my friend as much as possible, which backlighting is all over YouTube and no real secret these days, but it basically means you put your subject between the camera and the light, which gives things a little bit more definition and depth. It's a super easy trick to stop your images from looking flat, and I think in this case it really adds nicely to the moodiness. Now obviously this is a pretty intense example, as sometimes the shadows on the side of his face are almost completely blacked out, but that was intentional to fit the brief. If you don't want something so extreme, you could use a subtle fill light or a bit of bounce to fill in the shadows a little bit. The total time in the bike shop was about 3 hours, I think, so not long at all, and I was pretty happy with the results. Then to finish it up, I wanted to get some moving shots of him to actually show riding the bike and give a bit more dynamic camera movement, and that's where the 92 Corolla comes into play. Basically, we had another friend come out to drive it, and I sat in the open trunk. We drove around this dirty parking garage for 20 minutes and then went out into some alleys and did the same thing. And I basically just directed him to ride at different speeds and from different relative angles while I got what I could. To do this really beautifully, you'd want to use like a gimbal and a much more appropriate vehicle, but I didn't have either of those things at the time, so we just rolled with what we had, which happened to be the Corolla. The suspension was shot on this more than 30-year-old car, and so the real-time stuff I tried looked a little bit messy. So I switched over to 60 and then 120 frames a second to smooth it out and just sort of covered him as best as I could. We drove around for another half an hour, and then our driver took off and we finished up the shoot doing some long lens stuff on sticks. I knew I needed some sort of closing shot, so I just set up at the end of this alley, which I like the look of because of all the depth from the poles, and it fit the gritty look. So I had him ride towards me and come out of focus. It's nothing complicated, but in my opinion, it all came together pretty nicely. Then it was time to edit it together, and I also didn't want to spend more than a day on that, so I knew it should be short. Another reason for keeping it short was that I wanted the bike shop owner to be able to post it on social media as a reel or TikTok, so I aimed for the sub 1 minute mark. I also honestly just didn't want to do the editing to make it any longer, so it worked for us both. Before I started cutting, I needed a song to anchor the whole thing, and that's the perfect opportunity to talk about today's sponsor, Audio. I'm sure you hear me talk about them all the time on this channel, but having access to royalty-free music is even more important when you're trying to knock out spec projects like this quickly and on low budgets. Pretty much any project you're gonna make, unless you're going for a real No Country for Old Men vibe or something,
you don't know what you're talking about,
is gonna need music. So having good songs and sound effects that you can post online without getting sued is almost essential, unless you're also a composer. There are a lot of these services out there, and I've had subscriptions to pretty much all of them. But since I've started working with audio, I've canceled all the others, and I've been able to do 100% of my YouTube videos using their music, and even scored an entire rough cut of a short documentary film recently without feeling limited at all. And on top of that, it's just such a better deal financially than most of the competitors, and so I feel really good about recommending them. I don't really recommend anything on this channel that I don't use myself, and I wouldn't have partnered with them for so long now if I didn't really believe in it. I'm not gonna repeat all the raw numbers for like the 10th time here, but I'll just say they've got a lot of music. More than enough for what I need, like tens of thousands of sound effects and thousands of songs, and they're like a quarter of the price of what you'd normally expect to pay for one of these pro memberships. Right now, if you sign up for a 1-year plan and use the code Luke70 on checkout, it's just $59, and to be fair, that's pretty crazy. If you don't have a budget for a composer, which is pretty unlikely for spec projects like this, audio is gonna make your life much, much easier, and it's just one less thing to worry about, so you can focus on making these projects happen fast and with a tight budget. It's great for YouTube and even short films, and even if you cancel your membership, you're gonna be able to keep using the songs you downloaded. So for me, it's kind of a no-brainer to have a membership. I don't wanna drag this out because I know you're all here for the breakdown, so I'll leave it there, but it's a stellar deal and it covers me for all my everyday music needs. Plus it supports this channel in a small way, so if you need music, check the link in the description. Okay, back to the video. Once we got the last shots we needed, I cut this thing as fast as I possibly could. I'm not gonna do a full edit breakdown because I shot this thing years ago, and well, I just don't really remember exactly what I did, and I have no footage of it anyways. But I do know the first thing I would have done is make a dailies reel, or a rush reel, or highlight reel, or whatever you wanna call it. That basically means I took 5 to second clips from every single usable shot and strung them out on a timeline so that I could see what I really had. This step is crucial for a few reasons, but first, it's because it gets rid of all the times you filmed your feet for like 45 seconds or when you were struggling to find focus, but also it forces you to get to know your footage really well before you start editing. On top of that, it makes the whole workflow faster because when you're looking for a shot, you can just use the arrow keys on the keyboard to fly through the timeline and find different options really quickly. Because this film was so short, I only made one master reel, but if you're doing a multi-day doc shoot, I'd do exactly the same thing, but make a new timeline for each individual scene as well. Once I had my dailies cut, I dropped the song onto a timeline and found a clean place to cut it before the 60-second mark, and then just started messing around with different clips to see what worked together. The organizing probably took about 90 minutes, and the edit itself probably only about 2 hours. There was no sound mixing to do, and I kept the ending titles super simple so I didn't have to open After Effects or anything. And after some quick color correction and applying one of my own pre-made cinema LUTs, that was pretty much it. A day or so later, I took it over to a friend's place who's a pro editor, and he helped me change around a few things here and there to sort of tighten it up. Then we exported it, and that was that. While we're talking about LUTs, would you guys be interested if I released the ones I personally have for myself? I kind of feel like LUT packs were a huge thing a few years ago, and I'm not really sure if people are sick of them or not, so I've held back on that, but some people have asked lately, and so I've been thinking about putting them out there if you guys like the idea. Or maybe LUT packs are so 2020 and you guys are totally sick of them, so let me know that too. Anyways, once it was exported, I uploaded it to Vimeo and sent it to the bike shop owner and to the clients as proof of concept. It took about 8 or 9 hours in total, including editing and driving, and just $125 in a case of beer as a budget. Oh, and the 1992 Toyota Corolla, of course. Not bad at all if I do say so myself. So stop making excuses for not having a deep enough portfolio to get new clients. You can make these things really fast and really cheaply if you just go for it. Don't plan massive expeditions to the Himalayas for your spec projects, and don't try and reinvent the genre. Find something close, cheap, and accessible, and bang the thing out so you can move on to the next one. If there's a project or story you feel really strongly about, spend more time on it, but just go out and do this stuff because it's the only thing that will get you anywhere. All right, that's it for this video. Hope it was helpful in some way and that maybe it inspired you to get out and shoot that spec project you've been thinking about for a while. And if you want more breakdowns like this, I'm still working on my documentary cinematography course, which I'm hoping to roll out in the next couple of months. There's a link in the description to get on the wait list, and that's all for now. See ya.